Hello, everyone. Welcome to this interview. I'm Naomi, and this is Tom, who is the curate at St Paul's. Do you have anything else to add to that?
No, I am Tom. I am the curate at St Paul's. You got it right.
Perfect. Right. So I want to start with the basic kind of testimony question. How do you come to faith?
How did I come to faith? Yeah, I've got a super boring answer to that one. I used to get really jealous of people who have these really exciting testimonies. We used to, because I don't have one. We had when I was at Vicar College, we used to do this thing every Tuesday called Testimony Tuesday, where in the morning at the start of the day in chapel, at the chapel service, somebody would get up and share their testimony, and they were always like these amazing, rivaling Paul on the road to Damascus sort of conversion stories that they came up with. These people who just lived this really hedonistic lifestyle, and they were on the point of death, and then Jesus literally showed up physically and told them to follow him. And I've got nothing. But I've come to realize that actually it's not that big a deal, because I think it's okay not to have that glamorous a story. So basically, I went to church since being a baby, and I went to church and believed and had a faith all the way through, right up until I sort of had a wobble for about 8 years. Basically, I got to the age of 19, I think it was. I went off to university, and I don't think I went to church for about 8 years during that time. Or I wasn't at university for 8 years, but afterwards as well. I wasn't that bad. Yeah, I think I'd heard all about faith, and I'd been in church for a long time, and I believed everything I was hearing, or most of what I was hearing. But I think the thing that I couldn't get on board with particularly was the way that this was supposed to particularly change my life, because I didn't really feel like it was changing my life. And I think when I went off to university, I just sort of drifted away from church, and it just didn't seem to be something that was necessary. So my faith, whilst it was still there, was just totally on hold, and I wasn't really doing anything with it. And then one day got just drawn towards an advert on the side of a church for an Alpha course at a really tiny Methodist chapel near where we were living at the time, and went along to that, and just suddenly started to get excited again, and again, not particularly in any way that massively changed my life or what I was doing, but suddenly what really was exciting was Jesus, and was just, that was the thing that was sort of inescapable, I suppose, and that's what drew me back.
You say that's not an interesting story. It is an interesting story. It really is. It doesn't have to be drastic to be effective and interesting.
No, I think you're right. It's also I don't know. I guess it's potentially a story that a lot of people resonate with. That you don't have to. It's not the end of the world if you're not absolutely on fire with faith at any one moment in your life, because God is always working, and there's always a chance that at some point things are going to start eating up again.
Why did you start your ministry? Because I know you're an equine vet, so something to do with horses, but why did you just pack it all in and be like, I'm going to be a vicar?
Yeah, I don't know. What a mad thing to do. I was working as an equine vet for, I don't know, 13, 14, 15 years, something like that. And towards the end of that, so the last couple of years, I'd started to go much deeper with my faith, and one day a vicar of the church that I was at asked whether I wanted to preach at a service, and I thought, yeah, why not? I gave that a go, and it seemed to go well with the people who were there, and I absolutely loved doing it, and it felt like something I definitely should be doing. And so I then started doing more and more of it, and every time I preached or every time I led a service or did other stuff midweek, I kind of got the sense that God was saying, well, this is good, you've got a gift here, but I want you to do a bit more of it. And just kept on doing that. And then as I was feeling I need to be doing more and more, quite a few people, like some people I knew and some people I really didn't know, just said, so when are you going to become a vicar then? And I was like, yeah, okay. And so it really grew inside me of something which I thought, oh, I've got to do this, I've got to do this. And then one day I sort of came out to my vicar by saying, I want to be a vicar too. And he was like, yeah, good idea. And as soon as I let that out of my system and actually vocalized it, I just got this real feeling of peace inside my heart, that is the right thing to do. And I think that was a really good sign to me that the Holy Spirit was in it. It wasn't sort of something that I said and then was terrified of what that means and how I'm going to cope financially and in terms of the changes of lifestyle and everything. But it was, it was just that sense of peace made me think, yeah, this is the right thing to do.
That's really cool. Like, so cool. What is your favorite part of the Bible? So like you could either go broad with like prophetic or poetic or any other ones beginning with P, or just like book.
Okay. I guess it changes from time to time. It changes depending on what mood I'm in. Changes depending on what I've been reading recently. At the moment, I've got to say it's Revelation, because I'm about to do this course in Lent where we're going to study the book of Revelation together, and I'm going to do a bit of teaching on it, and we'll have some discussion on it. But just I've done the preparation from that, so sort of taking it from me liking Revelation to actually properly studying a whole load of books about it and trying to work out how I could potentially teach this and make it sort of a course that will be meaningful for anybody who wants to come along and listen to it. And there's so much in there which is just is really exciting when you start to work out what it all means, because when you first look at it, you're like, what on earth is this all about? This is quite literally mental. There's dragons and there's all sorts of evil characters in there, and there's angels, and there's all sorts of symbolism with different numbers, and you're like, this is just, the first time you read it, it's like, whoo. But then when you start to get your head around it, you realize that it's actually not as crazy as it looks, and this is actually a book that's written to give us a whole load of hope to endure really difficult times. And I couldn't really think of anything better to be looking at the moment in the difficult times that we're in. So yeah, that's something which I'm loving, and hopefully in a few weeks' time other people will be loving it too.
Quite an unusual choice. Most people are like, wow, Revelation, but like, I'm really excited. I've never studied it before, and I'm definitely coming. So
Cool.
And you seem to like Revelation 12 at the moment. Like there's been bits in the notice sheet and in sermons. Is that just your favourite bit of it, or?
No, it's not actually. But it happened to come up in the Bible readings that were set by the Church of England last week, and I was thinking, oh no, how on earth do I do this in an all age appropriate way for an online service? And then my daughter was like, oh yeah, that looks interesting, I can draw some pictures. Like, go for it. Always make use of your kids. Yeah, I can't remember. Yeah, it has come up a couple of times in other places, but I think my favorite bit of it is the bit that really gets me excited is the last couple of chapters, Revelation 21 and 22, which is all talking about this vision of the new earth to come. So sort of the heavenly vision for the future. basically. And what you've got to realize is it's written poetically. So if you try and make absolute literal sense of everything you read, you'll fail. But when you realize that it's being written poetically, you start to see some of the meanings that it's in there and some of the little hints about what's in there. And you start to realize that, wow, this future to come is incredibly creative and incredibly exciting. And it's not just this rather boring cartoon view of heaven where we're all going to be sat on a cloud just singing to worshiping God, and it's all going to be rather boring. There's a whole load of creativity and creation still going on within that future. And yeah, I think it'll be fun to hear what other people make of that when they read it.
Yeah, sounds really exciting. What is your like best God moment? So like that sounds very broad, but like a moment where you felt really close, really tight with God, and like it could be like a really rubbishy moment in your life where you're really tight with him. Or have you been fairly even keeled? You sound fairly even keeled, but
yeah, I mean, I don't know whether I've particularly got a really exciting story about a moment where I felt particularly close to God. There are just moments in worship, and that might be sort of song worship in church, or it might just be those moments where you're just encountering nature and you're encountering God's creation, and you're praying in that moment, whether you're praying in a way that's sort of a planned out prayer that would make audible sense if you said it, or whether it's just thoughts that are going through your head, which are probably prayers between you and God on a more subconscious level. But there are just moments where I can sense God's presence in those moments. And I this might sound a bit weird, but there was a period a while ago when I first started to, I guess going back to that time when I said I first started to get excited by Jesus, that I would pray, or there'd be worship songs, and I just my eyes would start doing this involuntary spasmy fluttery thing, which sounds a bit weird, but to me it made sense that I was seeing God in those moments. And that still happens intermittently every now and then. I just think it's God just saying, I'm here, I'm with you. And that's nice.
yeah, it sounds really comforting. Is there a converse to that, like the worst God moment or not?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's there's been times in my life where it's been particularly difficult, and I've prayed and just like hit a brick wall. It's like your prayers are just bouncing off and not being heard, and it's just like silence, basically. And that's really difficult, because when we're talking about all the nice stuff and the lovely testimonies, when God shows up in the good times in your life, sometimes it's almost like you didn't really actually need God in that time because things were going really well, which then makes it extra perverse when you're in times when you desperately need God and you just don't encounter anything at all. And that's really difficult, but it helps knowing that I've not been alone in those situations. There's a couple of books behind me there that I've read about this sort of stuff. Don't know whether you've ever read God on Mute by Pete Gregg. That's just brilliant on this sort of subject of how God can be silent in those situations. And C.S. Lewis wrote something similarly on about when his wife died and just got absolutely nothing. God was just absent, when he was praying. But in both of those books, they're sort of exploring the fact that God is still there, and God is still absolutely showering you with love at that moment. It's just potentially the pain is so much that you can't actually experience that at the time.
Yeah, it reminds me of the Shack. Like that was an amazing book that I read, and it's just like when all you can see is your pain, you lose sight of me. I think that it's a very true sentiment.
Yeah.
Do you have anything you do in particular when you can't hear God, or you just kind of keep trying and ride it out?
I mean, I think I've said this about church in the past, so forgive me if you've heard this before, but I think the majority of the time church is just about showing up, and the majority of the time you show up and not an enormous amount happens, at least in my experience. But if you don't ever show up, if you stop showing up, then nothing's ever going to happen. You're not going to have that chance of an experience with God. And the same's true with prayer. You know, I'll pray every day in various different ways, even when I don't really particularly feel like I've got anything to pray, or even when I feel like, oh, we're going through a season where just I'm not really hearing anything from God. This isn't really, you know, getting me anywhere. I still show up because that seems to be the only way that cycle gets broken, and suddenly there's a breakthrough, and you hear from God through something that somebody says that day, or through something you read in the Bible, or whatever. But if you're not actually trying to connect, then it's never going to happen.
What's your favourite thing about the church community, and what's been the hardest bit of the lockdown and the kind of COVID sitch?
I mean, the hardest thing I think about worship at the moment, or about services at the moment, you know, whether we're doing them online or whether we're in the building, I think we're really missing out on that fellowship over coffee or over a bit of cake or whatever at the end. And you know, just having those conversations with people, which is why we try to do the Zoom at the moment at the end, so people can chat. And why it's great that, you know, youth are able to meet as well in different groups. So that's something. Singing is something which I didn't realize I was going to miss that so much until you can't really do it. But what I probably missed the most, which is something which I love about community, is when we can get kids involved in services. You know, when you can get the Activate group up, you know, ask for volunteers to come up and do something before they then go out to their groups, and you just have that feeling that that church is for everybody then, and you're able to extend that welcome and get kids feeling like church is somewhere for them. And obviously now we have to have groups separate to the main service, and it just doesn't feel like we're all together. So that's what I'm missing, and that's the big thing I like about church community, is the fact that you can, you know, we're there for every single demographic, every age group, and that's what I'm hoping we can get back to pretty soon.
Has COVID impacted your personal relationship with God or not?
No, I don't think so. I mean, not negatively. I don't know. It's a difficult one. I mean, I know it's been a whole lot harder for other people than it has been for me. So I haven't had people in my family who've been affected by the pandemic in a seriously bad way, which a lot of people have. And maybe if I had, there would be all sorts of questions going through my head at the moment about where is God in this at the moment. You know, I've been able to look at it from a more sort of theoretical point of view, because it's not personally been impacting me so much. And it, you know, when it has been impacting, it's been about, you know, the work stuff or a change in routine, and you kind of feel a little bit guilty about really making a big deal out of that when there's people dying and there's people who are you know, in seriously bad ways. So you know, we've all got to come to terms with where God is in this at the moment, but it's not been too much of an issue for me.
You don't have like the emotional pain side of it as much, so you get to see the bigger picture, which is,
yeah, possibly.
Thank you for being
cool.
An amazing interviewee. It's been very enlightening.
Thank you for being an amazing interviewer.